Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to go ahead and add in the client ordering functionality so that the user is actually able to go ahead and order from the client from the app. So what I'll do here is that I'll quickly go ahead and run this application. But even before running this application, I just want to tell you guys that I've added a few items over here in the database. So as you could see, now we have a bunch of items over here. So we have brown rice with veggies. We also have Italian pasta over here. I've actually used the same image, and I've actually uploaded this data by using the owners app, which we have created in the previous lecture. So you could do that on your own for adding the data up over here, because while clicking the list items you do need to have multiple choices. But one thing which you do need to keep in mind is that whenever you're actually going ahead and adding these things up, you do need to make sure that the rules are actually set equal to null, because what happens is that if the rules are not set equal to null, then you won't be able to add items from that app, because in the owners app we have not yet added the functionality for login or signing up. So what you need to do now is that you need to set this equal to null, open up the owners app, add in the data, whatever kind of data which you want to add. After adding the data, come back over here and you need to set these values to not null, and after setting these values to not null, then you have to go back and run this application. So right now I'm going to run this application on my device just to show you guys what this looks like on adding multiple items, and after that we will start designing the functionality so that the client should actually be able to order. So again, it's asking me to sign in, so I'm going to sign in. The email is chris@gmail.com and the password is demo. Hit login, and as you could see, now we essentially have three items: pizza, Italian pasta and veg rice. And I've actually used these exact same image for all of these three things because I don't want to go ahead and so that's the reason why I've done that. You could use different images if you want to, but I have just used this thing. So what we need to do now is that we want to make sure that when the user clicks on one particular item, he should be actually redirected to a new activity, and that activity is going to have the item name, item description along with the price, and it should also have a button which basically says order now. So what we will do here is that we will create the ordering functionality. So in order to create the ordering functionality, what we will do is that we will go inside the menu activity, which is this activity right here, and in here in the populate view holder, which is over here under the view holder, we will add a listener which is going to be an on-click listener. So here what we will do is that first we will get the position on which the user has clicked. So we'll type in final string that's going to be called as, let's say, food key, not food plus key, that's going to be food key. So this is going to give us an idea on which particular item the user actually clicked. So that's going to be get ref, and in here for the get ref we will type in position. So we have the position now dot get key and convert it to a string finally. And once this thing is done, you could set up the on-click listener. So in order to set up the on-click listener, you type viewholder dot mview dot set on-click listener, and that's going to be new view dot on-click listener. So as you could see, now we have our on-click listener on place, and to this on-click listener, when the user actually clicks in on the item, we want to start a new activity which is going to be called as single food activity. So what we will do here is that we will create a new intent. So intent, that's going to be single food activity equals new intent, and in here let's pass in the current activity, which is menu activity dot this, and the next one is going to be single food activity dot class. So we have not yet created this class, but we will do it in a few seconds. So after that, what we need to do is that you also need to pass in the extra key so that the next activity actually understands for which particular food item it has to display the content. So we will type in single food activity dot put extra, and we are going to name it as, let's say, food ID, and pass in the food key over here. So once the food key is passed in, you could start the new activity, and in here for the new activity pass in the single food activity. So once this thing is done, we are good to go. Now let's go ahead and create this single food activity. So let's go to new activity. That's going to be an empty activity, and let's name it as single food activity. Click finish, and the activity should be created for you. Okay, so once we have this thing, let's go ahead and let's go to the activities XML code. So if you go to resources, layout, so this is the single food activity which we are looking for. So this should actually have an image view at the top with match parent and wrap content. Then we should have text views, that is 3 text views, one for title, that is the food title, the description, and the price. So I will quickly go ahead, type in text view, that's going to be match parent and wrap content. And what I'll do here is that to save time, I'll simply copy the entire thing and paste it twice over here. And then finally we are going to have a button over here which is going to be match parent and wrap content as well. So one thing which you need to do is that you need to convert this to a linear layout with the orientation as vertical. And after that, let's go ahead and quickly assign these things an ID. So that's going to be ID @ plus ID, and let's say this thing says single image view for the food item. And also let's set the height to, let's say, 200 dps instead of wrap content, so that would be much better. So here we are going to have our image, and here for the text view, this is going to be having an ID which is going to be called as, let's say, single title. Let's say this is going to have an ID which is going to say single description, and this one is going to say single price. So that's going to be ID @ plus ID single price. And for the final one, that is this button, you need to have a text which says let's say order item, and the on click for this button is going to be, let's say, order item clicked. So once everything is set up, we are basically good to go. Now this kind of looks empty because no values are actually assigned to them at this point. And you could also go ahead and set the text size for this if you want to. So after this, what we will do is that we will go ahead and start coding the Java code for the single food activity. So what we will do here is that we will go to single food activity over here, and we will create a string first to get the food key. So if you remember, we actually passed in a food key over here so as to identify on which particular item the user actually clicked on. So first we will initialize it to null. Then we will have a reference to the database reference. So that's going to be m database because you do want to extract values from there. And then we will type in private, and we will get a reference to all the text views. So text view single food title, next one is single food description, then we have single food price. And once we have these things, let's also get a reference to the image view as well. So that's going to be image view single, that should be single food image. And let's also get a reference to the button as well. So that's going to be private button, let's say m button, and hopefully we don't need it, or let's say we type it order button, and let's basically import button. And then finally we also have a reference to the Firebase auth. So private Firebase auth, let's name it as mauth. And once this thing is done, the final thing which we need to do is that we get a reference to each of these things in here in the onCreate method. So in order to save time, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pause this video, I'm going to type these things for you, and then we will resume our lecture. Okay, so as you could see, I have added some code over here. So let's go through the code one by one. So what we have done over here is that we have extracted the food key value from the intent. So we have passed in a value which was extra value in the intent, which was food key, to identify which food item is clicked. So we have retrieved the food key over here. Then we actually went ahead and got a reference to the database who's having a child which is called as item. Then we basically went ahead and got a description to each of these food items, which is the single food title, description, price, and image. And hopefully these things are named quite similar. And then we have assigned it an IDs, which is single description, single title, single price, and single image view. And make sure that you have the same IDs over here. So that's single title, single description, single price, and single image view. So once we have it, we are basically good to go. And then finally, we also had a reference to mauth. And what we will do here is that we will go ahead and extract values for the particular food key from our database. So what we essentially want to do here is that, as you could see, we have extracted the food ID over here. And for this food ID, you want to search the value, which is nothing but this particular value over here. So if you go back to the menu activity right over here, as you could see, we have passed in the food key, and food key is nothing but the current food string value. So once we have this value, you could easily get the value of entire root from this particular database. So once you have this value, you automatically get access to all these things. So what we will do here is that we will type in mdatabase.child and look for the value of food key. And once that thing is added, you add the value event listener to this, which is going to be new value event listener. And once the data change method is applied, what you need to do is that in this data change method, you actually want to go ahead and extract the values for the food name, price, description, and image. So this code actually means that we got an access to one of the roots depending upon which the user actually clicked. And now what we will do is that once we have access to a particular root, we extract all these values and store them into a string variable. So in order to do that, I'll just pause the video, type in the code, and show you guys what it actually looks like. Okay, so as you could see, I have actually extracted all the values over here. So I've extracted these values in the string named food underscore name, food underscore price, food underscore description. And to get those values, I've typecasted them to string, then I've used the data snapshot from here, then I got a reference to the child, which is name, price, description, and image, and then finally I got those values. And you need to make sure that these child values are actually similar to the child values over here in your Firebase database, or else your code is not going to work properly. So once you have a reference to these things, I've actually set up the actual views, which are these views over here, equal to those values. And one final thing which I have left purposely just to show or explain you guys is the Picasso for the image. So Picasso.width is going to be single food activity dot this. Then we will load an image, which is going to be the food image. So we will load the food image into single food image. So once we have loaded that, we are basically good to go. So now what you need to do is that you need to go into the onCreate method, which is this method right here, and you also need to get a reference to the Firebase auth. So we already have a reference to the Firebase auth as well. And now what we will do is that we will also go ahead and get a reference to the current user as well, because what you want to do is that you also want to get a reference to the current user so that you know which particular user is ordering your item. So in order to get current user, we will type in current underscore user, that's going to be equal to mauth dot get current user. And then finally you do need to declare this thing. So I'm going to go over here, create a local variable. So that's going to be Firebase user, and it's actually better if you create this variable over here. So that's going to be private Firebase user. That's going to be current user. So once we have the current user, what you could do is that you could get its ID, you could do all kinds of things with this. Now what we will do here is that we will get a reference to the child which is named as users, because what we want to do here is that we want to get the current user ID of that particular child. So we will type in user data so as to store the user data into a particular variable. So user data equals, that's going to be Firebase database dot get instance dot get reference, not get app, that should be get reference dot child, and look for a child which is going to be called as users, and look for a child which is going to be current user dot get UID. So we essentially get the UID. So you also need to declare this thing over here. So that's going to be database reference comma, let's say user data, and we are basically good to go. So now the final thing which you need to do is that once we have the button in the single food activity, you need to add a functionality for this thing so that when the user actually clicks this button, the order should actually be placed. So even before doing that, what we will do is that we'll quickly run this application to see if the on-click listener is working fine, and it should be working fine, hopefully. So I'm going to save the code and run this application on my device. So as you could see, the application is up and running. So let me just quickly go to sign in, and in here I'm going to type in the name as Chris at gmail.com, demo and demo. Hit login. Here we have the list. Let me click on Italian pasta, and as you could see, we have the image of the Italian pasta, the name, description, and the price. Now this layout looks quite dull, and we are actually going to modify it later in this course, but for now this thing actually works fine. So the final thing which remains is that we need to make sure that this order item button is functional, and when we click that button, we should be able to order this particular item. So that's it for this lecture, and in the next lecture we will design the functionality for the order item button. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.